My name is, or rather was, Evelyn Langford. That name carries baggage, a history I've shed like a snake's old skin. Back then, Evelyn was synonymous with second best. My sister Camilla was the diamond, the showstopper, the one who glittered so brightly she blinded everyone to anything else, including me. It wasn't a case of blatant cruelty. It wasn't like they locked me in a cupboard under the stairs. It was more insidious, a slow, steady erosion of my self-worth, a constant, subtle message that I wasn't quite enough. Camilla got the lead in the school play, Mom would announce, beaming at the dinner table. Isn't that wonderful? That's great, Camilla, I'd say, forcing a smile. I'd actually auditioned for the same play, for a smaller part, and hadn't even made the chorus. Oh, Evelyn, Dad would say, almost as an afterthought. How did your science project go? It won second place in the regional competition, I'd mumble, knowing it wouldn't register. Second place? Well, that's nice, Mom would say, her eyes already drifting back to Camilla. Darling, tell us about rehearsals. Was Mr. Henderson pleased with your performance? And that was it. My achievement, my effort, my existence, reduced to a polite, dismissive, that's nice. It was always about Camilla, her grades, her friends, her talents, her potential. It wasn't just the big things. It was the everyday moments, the casual conversations, the unspoken assumptions. Camilla got the new dress. I got her hand-me-downs. Camilla got the extra helping of dessert. I got a reminder to watch my weight. Camilla got the compliments, the encouragement, the love. I got used to being invisible. One particularly vivid memory sticks with me. I was about 14, and I'd spent weeks preparing for a piano recital. I'd practiced diligently, sacrificing sleep and social life to master a challenging piece by Chopin. I was nervous, but also excited. This was my thing, something I was good at, something that wasn't overshadowed by Camilla's brilliance. The night of the recital arrived. I remember standing backstage, my heart pounding, my hands clammy. I peeked through the curtains and saw my parents in the audience. They were smiling, chatting with the other parents, their faces glowing with anticipation, pride. For a fleeting moment, I allowed myself to hope. Maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. Maybe this time they would see me. I walked onto the stage, took a deep breath, and began to play. The music flowed through me, filling the hall with its beauty and complexity. I poured all my emotions, all my longing, all myself into the performance. When I finished, there was a moment of silence, followed by polite applause. I bowed, my heart sinking. I scanned the audience, searching for my parents' faces. They were clapping, yes, but their eyes were glazed over, their smiles perfunctory. They weren't seeing me, they were just going through the motions. After the recital, there was a small reception. Parents mingled with their children, offering congratulations and praise. I stood alone, clutching a plastic cup of punch, watching Camilla surrounded by a gaggle of admirers. My mother finally approached me, her expression apologetic. Evelyn, dear, she said, her voice a little too high-pitched. That was very nice. You played well. Thank you, Mom, I replied, my voice flat. Camilla's friends are having a little get-together, she continued, her eyes darting nervously towards my sister. We promised we'd take her, so we have to go now. Oh, I said, the single syllable a choked whisper. Okay. We'll see you at home, dear, she said, giving me a quick, perfunctory hug. Be careful on the bus. And then they were gone, leaving me standing there alone with my plastic cup of punch and the crushing weight of their indifference. That night, I cried myself to sleep. Not because I was sad, but because I was empty. I had finally realized that I would never be enough for them. No matter how hard I tried, no matter what I achieved, I would always be in Camilla's shadow. The accident, years later, was almost anticlimactic. It was the final, definitive proof of what I had already known. I remember waking up in the hospital, the pain a dull, throbbing ache throughout my body. I was hooked up to machines, my left leg in a cast, my arm in a sling. Where's my family? I asked the nurse, my voice raspy. She gave me a sympathetic look. We've been trying to reach them, dear, but there's been no answer. No answer, I repeated, my mind struggling to process the information. But they must know. I called. We'll keep trying, she said, patting my hand. Try to rest. But I couldn't rest. I couldn't stop the thoughts swirling in my head. They know. They must know. Why aren't they here? The hours ticked by, agonizingly slow. Each beep of the monitor, each rustle of the curtains, each distant footstep in the hallway sent a jolt of hope through me, quickly followed by a crushing wave of disappointment. Finally, the nurse came back, her face a mixture of pity and something else, embarrassment. I managed to reach your mother, she said, her voice carefully neutral. And? I asked, my heart pounding. She sends her apologies, Miss Langford. They're unable to come. Your sister, Camilla, is receiving an international award for something. They're at the ceremony. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. An international award, more important than their injured daughter. I see, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. They said they'd try to visit later, the nurse added, her voice trailing off. Don't bother, I said, a strange calmness settling over me. Tell them not to bother. The nurse looked at me, her eyes filled with concern. Are you sure, Miss Langford? Yes, I said, my voice firm. I'm sure. In that moment, something shifted inside me. The pain, the fear, the longing. It all receded, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I was done. Done with trying, done with hoping, done with them. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in years, I felt free. The betrayal had broken me, yes, but it had also liberated me. I was no longer bound by their expectations, their indifference, their love. I was finally truly alone, and in that loneliness, I found my strength. The physical recovery was a blur of physiotherapy, pain medication, and endless doctor's appointments. I went through the motions, following instructions, doing the exercises, taking the pills. But my mind was elsewhere. It was already racing ahead, planning, strategizing, plotting my escape. The insurance payout was a godsend. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough. Enough to start over, enough to buy myself some time, enough to disappear. I spent hours researching different countries, looking for a place where I could blend in, where I could reinvent myself, where I could build a life that was entirely my own. I narrowed it down to a few options, finally settling on a country in Southeast Asia. It was far enough away, culturally different enough, and economically promising enough to offer the anonymity and opportunity I craved. I started selling my belongings, quietly, discreetly. I posted ads online, met with buyers in neutral locations, and accepted whatever price they offered. I didn't haggle. I didn't care about getting the best deal. I just wanted to get rid of everything, to sever all ties with my past. My old apartment, a small, cramped studio I shared with a roommate, a friend of Camilla's naturally, was filled with reminders of my old life. Photographs of my family, gifts I'd received over the years, clothes that no longer fit my new persona. I packed them all into boxes, labeled them donate, and left them in the hallway. Are you sure you don't want any of this stuff, Ev? My roommate Sarah asked, her brow furrowed with concern. Some of it's pretty valuable. I'm sure, I said, forcing a smile. I'm decluttering, starting fresh. Sarah didn't understand, of course. She couldn't possibly understand. She was one of them, one of the chosen ones, one of the people who basked in the glow of Camilla's reflected glory. Well, if you change your mind, she said, trailing off. I won't, I replied, my voice firm. The day I left, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Fear, excitement, sadness, relief. I walked out of the apartment with a single suitcase, leaving behind everything I had ever known. I took a taxi to the airport, my heart pounding with each passing mile. I checked in, went through security, and boarded the plane. As the plane took off, I looked out the window, watching the city lights fade below. I didn't cry. I didn't feel regret. I felt nothing. Just a vast, empty space where my old life used to be. The flight was long and uneventful. I slept, ate, and stared blankly at the in-flight entertainment system. I was a blank slate, a ghost, a nobody. And that was exactly how I wanted it. When I arrived in my new country, I felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it, my new beginning, my chance to rewrite my story. The first few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. I found a small, affordable apartment in a bustling neighborhood, far from the tourist areas. I enrolled in an intensive language course, determined to master the local dialect as quickly as possible. I explored the city, immersing myself in the culture, learning the customs, absorbing the atmosphere. I also started researching the local business landscape. I spent hours in libraries and internet cafes, studying market trends, identifying opportunities, and developing a business plan. I knew I wanted to start my own company, something that would allow me to express my creativity, utilize my skills, and build something of lasting value. I had always been interested in fashion and design, but I had never dared to pursue it seriously. Now I had nothing to lose. I started small, designing and creating jewelry in my tiny apartment. I sourced materials from local markets, experimenting with different styles, techniques, and designs. I taught myself how to use design software, how to build a website, how to market my products online. It was hard work, exhausting work, but it was also exhilarating. For the first time in my life, I was doing something for myself, something that I was passionate about, something that I believed in. I launched my online store Aura with a handful of handcrafted pieces. I priced them competitively, marketed them aggressively, and waited. The first few sales were slow, trickling in one by one. But then something unexpected happened. A local fashion blogger discovered my store and wrote a glowing review of my designs. Her post went viral, and suddenly I was flooded with orders. I worked day and night, fulfilling orders, responding to inquiries, managing my inventory. I barely slept, barely ate, barely had time to think. But I didn't care. I was driven by a force I couldn't explain, a burning desire to succeed, to prove myself, to show them what I was capable of. Show them that I wasn't just Camilla's forgotten sister. Show them that I was Evelyn Langford and I was here to make my mark. The success of Aura didn't happen overnight. It was a gradual, steady climb, fueled by hard work, strategic planning, and a bit of luck. But within a year, my small online store had transformed into a thriving business with a loyal customer base and a growing reputation for quality and innovation. I moved out of my tiny apartment and into a larger space, which served as both my home and my workshop. I hired a small team of assistants to help me with production, marketing, and customer service. I invested in new equipment, expanded my product line, and started exploring opportunities for international expansion. I also started to develop my own personal style, a style that reflected my newfound confidence and my growing success. I traded in my dowdy clothes for tailored suits, elegant dresses, and statement jewelry. I cut my hair, experimented with makeup, and learned to carry myself with an air of authority and grace. I was becoming the woman I had always wanted to be: strong, independent, successful, and I was doing it all on my own terms. My financial knowledge, which I had initially dismissed as a boring subject forced upon me by my parents, who thought it might be useful for managing Camilla's future earnings, became my secret weapon. I understood how to manage cash flow, how to negotiate with suppliers, how to secure loans, how to invest wisely. I wasn't just designing jewelry, I was building a brand. I was creating a legacy. The decision to expand into the luxury market was a calculated risk. I knew that it would be a challenge to compete with established brands, with their vast resources and their decades of experience. But I also knew that I had something unique to offer: a fresh perspective, a commitment to quality, and a story that resonated with a new generation of consumers. I focused on creating products that were not only beautiful but also meaningful. I used ethically sourced materials, I supported local artisans, and I donated a portion of my profits to charities that supported women's education and empowerment. I told my story, or rather, a carefully crafted version of it, to the media. I talked about my passion for design, my commitment to sustainability, my desire to create a brand that was both luxurious and socially responsible. I didn't mention my family, of course. I didn't mention Camilla. The media loved it. They dubbed me the rebel designer, the eco-warrior of luxury, the new face of fashion. My brand was featured in prestigious magazines, on influential blogs, and on popular television shows. My sales soared. My company grew. My name became known, and then it was time. Time to go home. Not home in the emotional sense, of course, but home to the place where it all began, the place where I had been forgotten. I had been meticulously planning my return for years. I had tracked my family's movements, monitored their finances, and studied their weaknesses. I knew exactly what I was going to do, and I knew exactly how I was going to do it. I chose the timing carefully. I waited until Camilla was launching her latest project, a highly anticipated fashion line that was supposed to be her comeback after a series of recent setbacks. I knew that the media attention would be focused on her, that the pressure would be on, that she would be vulnerable. I opened my flagship store in the city's most exclusive shopping district a week before Camilla's launch. The store was a statement, a declaration of my arrival. It was sleek, modern, and minimalist with floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased my designs in all their glory. The opening night was a star-studded event. Celebrities, socialites, fashion editors, and business tycoons flocked to the store, eager to see the new sensation that everyone was talking about. I stood at the entrance, greeting my guests, shaking hands, posing for photographs. I was the epitome of confidence, of success, of power. And I knew with absolute certainty that my family would be watching. They would be reading the articles, seeing the photographs, hearing the whispers. They would be wondering. They would be regretting. They would be afraid. And that, I thought with a small, cold smile, was just the beginning. It wasn't just business today. My face, my new face, started popping up everywhere. Forbes ran a piece on Aura's disruptive approach to luxury. Vogue featured my jewelry on a 6-page spread, modeled by an A-list actress. Even the local news did a segment on the grand opening of my flagship store, highlighting the local girl makes good angle, though they conveniently omitted the forgotten and abandoned part of the story. Each article, each photograph, each news clip was a carefully placed domino. I wasn't just selling jewelry, I was selling a narrative. And that narrative was meticulously crafted to dismantle the one my family had built around themselves. I made sure my presence was unavoidable. I attended industry events, strategically placing myself in the path of key investors and journalists. I gave interviews, always steering the conversation towards my brand's philosophy, my commitment to ethical sourcing, and my unique journey to success. The word unique was a loaded weapon, a subtle jab at the privilege and nepotism that had always surrounded Camilla. The first ripple of recognition came, ironically, not from my parents, but from a distant cousin, a woman named Beatrice, who I barely remembered. She saw one of my interviews on a morning talk show and sent a frantic email to my mother. I imagined the scene vividly. My mother, Margaret, probably still in her silk pajamas, sipping her morning coffee, scrolling through her emails. My father, Robert, likely already dressed in his expensive suit, preparing for another day of, well, whatever it was he did these days. And Camilla. Camilla would be meticulously applying her makeup, preparing for another day of being Camilla. The subject line of Beatrice's email, I later learned, was, "Is this Evelyn?" My mother, I imagined, would have scoffed. Evelyn? Our Evelyn. Don't be ridiculous, Beatrice. She probably clicked on the link out of idle curiosity, expecting to see some other Evelyn Langford, some random stranger who shared my name, but then she saw my face, not the timid, mousy face she remembered, not the face that always seemed to be apologizing for its own existence. This face was different, confident, bold, powerful. "Robert, Camilla, come look at this!" she would have shrieked, her voice tinged with a mixture of disbelief and fear. They gathered around the screen, staring at the image of me, the forgotten daughter, transformed into a successful businesswoman. That can't be her," Camilla would have said, her voice a mixture of denial and disdain. "She's different. She looks expensive." My father, ever the pragmatist, would have focused on the details. "Aura, that's her company? It's everywhere. How did she do this?" Their carefully constructed world, the world where Camilla was the star and I was a footnote, began to tremble. The foundation of their reality, built on lies and omissions, started to crack. "Evelyn, that can't be our Evelyn." my mother would have whispered, her voice barely audible. The unspoken question hung in the air. What have we done? The denial didn't last long. The evidence was too overwhelming. The photographs, the articles, the interviews, they all pointed to the undeniable truth. I was back, and I was a force to be reckoned with. Their initial shock soon gave way to a flurry of frantic phone calls. They called their friends, their relatives, their business associates, anyone who might have information about me, about my company, about my success. They learned about my rapid rise in the business world, about my innovative designs, about my commitment to ethical practices. They learned about the awards I had won, the accolades I had received, the respect I had earned, and with each new piece of information, their disbelief turned to bewilderment, their bewilderment to anger, and their anger to fear. They had underestimated me. They had dismissed me. They had forgotten me. And now I was back to remind them. Camilla's downfall wasn't a sudden, dramatic collapse. It was a slow, agonizing unraveling, a gradual erosion of everything she had built her identity upon. And I orchestrated it, not with malice, but with a cold, calculated precision. I didn't directly attack her. I didn't spread rumors or engage in petty sabotage. I simply existed. My success, my visibility, my presence was enough to undermine her. Camilla's latest fashion line, the one that was supposed to be her triumphant return, was launched with great fanfare. There were lavish parties, celebrity endorsements, and glowing reviews in all the usual fashion publications. But something was different this time. The buzz was muted. The excitement was forced. The sales were disappointing. Investors, who had once been eager to throw money at anything with the Langford name attached, started to get nervous. They saw the shifting landscape of the fashion industry. They saw the rise of Aura, the decline of Camilla's brand, the changing of the guard. One by one, they started to pull out, quietly, discreetly, without making a fuss. They didn't want to be associated with a sinking ship. Camilla, desperate to salvage the situation, tried everything she could think of. She slashed prices, offered discounts, and even resorted to begging some of her former sponsors to reconsider. But it was no use. The momentum had shifted, the damage was done. I watched it all unfold with a detached sense of satisfaction. It wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. It was about showing the world, and more importantly, showing myself, that I was not the weak, insignificant person my family had always believed me to be. One particularly satisfying moment came during a fashion industry gala. I was there, of course, as a VIP guest, mingling with the elite, accepting compliments on my latest collection. Camilla was also there, clinging to the fringes of the crowd, her smile strained, her eyes darting nervously around the room. She was wearing one of her own designs, a gaudy, over-the-top creation that looked desperate and out of place. Our paths crossed near the bar. For a moment, our eyes met. I saw a flicker of recognition in hers, followed by a flash of hatred. "Evelyn," she said, her voice tight with barely suppressed anger. "Fancy seeing you here." "Camilla," I replied, my voice cool and composed. "How is your new line doing?" The question was a deliberate jab, a subtle reminder of her recent failures. Her smile faltered, her eyes narrowed. "It's doing fine," she said, her voice defensive. "Just fine." "Really?" I said, raising an eyebrow. "That's not what I've been hearing." "Well, you shouldn't believe everything you hear," she snapped. "People are jealous, so they're trying to bring me down." "Are they?" I asked, my voice soft, almost pitying. She didn't answer. She just glared at me, her face a mask of resentment and frustration. "You know, Camilla," I continued, my voice still gentle, "it's not too late to change, to reinvent yourself, to find something you're actually good at." The implication was clear. She wasn't good at this. She had never been good at this. She had just been riding on the coattails of her family's name and her own manufactured image. Her face flushed with anger. "I don't need your advice, Evelyn," she hissed. "You're just jealous. You always have been." I smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that I knew would infuriate her. "Jealous? Of what, Camilla? Your dwindling bank account? Your fading fame? Your empty life?" She opened her mouth to retort, but no words came out. She just stood there, speechless, defeated. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone, surrounded by the glittering crowd that had once been her adoring audience. It was a small victory, perhaps, but it was a significant one. It was a moment of truth, a moment of reckoning. It was the moment Camilla finally realized that her reign was over. My parents, predictably, reacted with a mixture of panic and desperation. They saw their daughter's empire crumbling, their family name tarnished, their carefully constructed image shattered. They had always relied on Camilla to maintain their social standing, to secure their financial future, to validate their existence. Now, she was failing, and they had no one else to turn to. Except me. The phone calls started first. My private number, the one only a handful of people had, began ringing incessantly. I ignored them all. Then came the emails, the text messages, the letters. They were filled with apologies, with excuses, with pleas. Evelyn, darling, we're so sorry. We know we made mistakes. We were wrong. Please forgive us. We're so proud of you, Evelyn. You've accomplished so much. We always knew you had it in you. We need your help, Evelyn. Camilla's in trouble. The family's in trouble. Please, we're begging you. Their words were hollow, empty. They rang with insincerity, with desperation, with self-interest. They didn't regret their actions. They regretted the consequences of their actions. They didn't love me. They loved what I could do for them. I finally agreed to meet with them, not out of any sense of obligation or forgiveness, but out of a cold, detached curiosity. I wanted to see them, to hear them, to understand them. We met at a quiet, upscale restaurant, one they had chosen, no doubt, to impress me. They were waiting for me at a secluded table, their faces etched with anxiety. My mother, Margaret, rushed to greet me, her arms outstretched for a hug. I stepped back, politely but firmly declining the embrace. "Evelyn, darling, you look wonderful," she said, her voice trembling. "So successful." My father, Robert, cleared his throat. We're very proud of you, Evelyn. You've done so well for yourself." I sat down, placing my handbag on the table, a silent barrier between us. "Thank you," I said, my voice neutral. "What is it you wanted to discuss?" They exchanged nervous glances. My mother took a deep breath. "Evelyn, we need to talk about Camilla." "What about her?" I asked, my voice devoid of emotion. She's not doing well," my father said, his voice hesitant. "Her business, it's failing. She's losing everything." "And you want me to, what, help her?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Well, yes," my mother said, her voice pleading. "You're so successful now. You have so much influence. You could save her." I leaned back in my chair, studying their faces. They were desperate, yes, but they were also entitled. They expected me to help them, to rescue them, to fix their problems, as if I owed them something. "Why should I?" asked, my voice cold. The question hung in the air, heavy and uncomfortable. They didn't have an answer. They couldn't say, "Because we're your family," because they had never truly been my family. They couldn't say, "Because we love you," because they had never truly loved me. "Evelyn," my father said, his voice strained. "We know we haven't always been the best parents. We made mistakes. We favored Camilla, but we always cared about you. We always wanted the best for you." "Did you?" I asked, my voice sharp. "Did you really? Or did you just want the best for yourselves? Did you want a daughter who would make you proud? A daughter who would reflect well on you? A daughter who would fit into your perfect little world?" They flinched, their eyes darting away from mine. They couldn't meet my gaze. They knew I was right. "I waited for you," I said, my voice low and steady. "I waited for you in that hospital room. I waited for you to call, to visit, to care, but you never came. You chose Camilla. You always chose Camilla." "We were wrong," my mother whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. "We were so wrong." "Yes," I said, my voice devoid of pity. "You were. Please, Evelyn, my father begged. Help us. Help Camilla. We're desperate. I looked at them, these two people who had brought me into the world, who had raised me, who had broken me, and I felt nothing, just a cold, empty void where my heart used to be. I took out a business card and slid it across the table to them. Contact my assistant. If there is a viable business proposal and a sound strategy for repayment, I might consider an investment, but don't expect any family discount. I smiled, a cold, mirthless smile. I learned everything I know about business from you, after all. Then I stood up, picked up my handbag, and walked away, without looking back. The gala was the event of the season, the Philanthropic Society of the Arts annual fundraiser. It was a gathering of the city's elite, the wealthy, the powerful, the influential. And, of course, the Langfords were expected to be there. It was a charity event, ostensibly, but everyone knew it was really a social battleground. A place to see and be seen, to network, to gossip, and, most importantly, to display one's status and success. I had been invited, of course. Aura was a major sponsor of the event, and I, as its CEO, was a highly sought-after guest. I had initially hesitated to accept. I had no desire to mingle with the very people who had once looked down on me, who had dismissed me as insignificant. But then I realized this was the perfect opportunity, the perfect stage, the perfect audience. For years, I had played the game by their rules. I had been polite, respectful, and discreet. I had built my success quietly, strategically, without making waves. But now it was time to change the rules. It was time to make some noise. I spent weeks preparing for the event, not just choosing the perfect dress, a stunning, custom-made creation in midnight blue silk, of course, but also crafting my speech. I knew that I would be asked to say a few words as a representative of one of the event's major sponsors. Usually, these speeches were bland, predictable affairs, filled with platitudes and thank yous. But mine would be different. Mine would be explosive. The night of the gala arrived. I entered the ballroom with my head held high, my eyes scanning the crowd. I saw them almost immediately. My parents, Robert and Margaret, stood near the entrance, looking anxious and uncomfortable. They were dressed in their usual finery, but their smiles seemed forced, their eyes darting nervously around the room. Camilla was with them, clinging to their arms like a lifeline. She was wearing a dress that was clearly last season's, a desperate attempt to maintain an illusion of relevance. Her makeup was heavy, her hair overstyled, her smile brittle. They saw me, of course. Their eyes widened in recognition, followed by a mixture of shock, fear, and hope. I ignored them. I made my way through the crowd, exchanging pleasantries with acquaintances, accepting congratulations on my success, and subtly planting the seeds of my impending revelation. "I'm so looking forward to your speech, Evelyn," one prominent socialite gushed. "I hear it's going to be memorable." "I hope it will be," I replied, smiling enigmatically. "I have something important to say." The rumor spread quickly. By the time I was called to the stage, the entire ballroom was buzzing with anticipation. I walked to the podium, the spotlight shining brightly on me. I looked out at the sea of faces, at the expectant eyes, at the Langfords huddled together in the front row, their faces pale with apprehension. I took a deep breath, and then I began. "Good evening, everyone," I said, my voice clear and strong. "I want to thank the Philanthropic Society of the Arts for hosting this wonderful event. And I want to thank all of you for your generous support. So far, so good," the usual platitudes. The audience relaxed, expecting more of the same. "But tonight," I continued, my voice taking on a harder edge, "I want to talk about something a little different. I want to talk about family." A hush fell over the room. The Langfords shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "Family," I repeated, my eyes locking onto my parents. "We all have one. Some are loving, supportive, nurturing. Others are not." I paused, letting the words sink in. The tension in the room was palpable. 5 years ago," I continued, my voice now filled with a controlled anger, "I was in a car accident. I was seriously injured. I was alone, and I was forgotten." I saw my mother gasp, her hand flying to her mouth. My father's face turned ashen. Camilla stared at me, her eyes wide with disbelief. My family, I said, my voice ringing with accusation, was too busy celebrating my sister's achievement to come to the hospital. They were too busy to care. A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Whispers erupted, heads turned, eyes stared. I lay there in that hospital bed for days. I continued, my voice trembling slightly, but still strong. Waiting, hoping, praying, but they never came. I paused again, letting the silence amplify the weight of my words. That night, I said, my voice now a low, controlled whisper, I learned a valuable lesson. I learned that family is not always about blood. It's about love. It's about support. It's about being there. And my family was not there. I looked directly at my parents, my eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and contempt. They left me, cold, forgotten, abandoned. The words hung in the air, heavy and accusatory. The silence was deafening. Then the media erupted. Cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled furiously in their notebooks. Questions were shouted from all directions. The scandal was immediate and it was devastating. The next day, my story was on the front page of every newspaper, on every news website, on every social media platform. The Langfords, once the epitome of high society, were now the subject of public scorn and ridicule, and my parents' reputation was destroyed. Their business associates distanced themselves, their friends abandoned them, their social standing evaporated. Camilla, already struggling, lost everything. Her remaining sponsors pulled their contracts, her investors vanished, her social media accounts were flooded with hateful comments. She became a pariah, a cautionary tale, a symbol of fallen grace. The Aura brand, meanwhile, soared to even greater heights. My story of resilience, of triumph over adversity, resonated with people around the world. I became an icon, a symbol of hope, a survivor. They came to me, of course. They had nowhere else to go. They found me at my office, a sprawling, modern space overlooking the city. They were ushered into my presence by my assistant, their faces etched with a mixture of shame, regret, and desperation. Evelyn, my mother began, her voice trembling. We need to talk. I looked at them, my expression unreadable. I had rehearsed this moment in my mind countless times, imagining the words I would say, the emotions I would feel. But now, standing before them, I felt nothing, just a cold, empty detachment. What is there to talk about? I asked, my voice flat. We made a mistake, my father said, his voice hoarse. A terrible mistake. We pushed you away. We neglected you. We didn't appreciate you. We were blinded by Camilla's success, my mother added, her eyes filled with tears. We thought she was the one who needed us. We didn't realize. She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. You didn't realize that I was your daughter too? I finished for her, my voice laced with sarcasm. Camilla, who had been standing silently behind her parents, finally spoke. It wasn't my fault, Evelyn, she said, her voice defensive. I didn't ask them to ignore you. I didn't ask them to love me more. No, I said, my voice cold. You didn't ask them. You just enjoyed it. You reveled in it. You thrived on it. That's not true, she protested, her voice rising. I worked hard. I earned my success. Did you? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Or did you just ride on the coattails of your family's name, your parents' connections, my shadow? She opened her mouth to retort, but no words came out. She knew I was right. We're sorry, Evelyn, my father said, his voice pleading. Please forgive us. We're your family. I looked at them. These three people who had caused me so much pain, who had broken my heart, who had abandoned me. And I felt nothing. I waited for you once, I said, my voice low and steady, in that hospital room. I waited for you to come, to care, to love me, but you never did. I paused, letting the words sink in. Never again. And with that, I turned and walked away, leaving them standing there, alone, in the ruins of their shattered lives. I never saw them again. I never spoke to them again. I never thought of them again. I had moved on. I had built a new life, a new family, a new Identity. Evelyn Langford, the forgotten daughter, was gone. And in her place stood Evelyn, CEO of Aura, a woman of power, of influence, of resilience. A woman who had learned that sometimes the greatest revenge is simply living well, and I was living very well. My life was my masterpiece now, and I wouldn't allow anyone, especially my family, to tarnish it ever again. The past was a closed chapter, a book I'd slammed shut and thrown into the deepest, darkest abyss, and there it would stay forever.